Imagine stepping off a train after days of hunger, fear, and despair. You expect the worst, but you still cling to a faint hope that someone in authority might show you mercy. Then, you see him, a man in a crisp white coat, clipboard in hand, eyes cold and calculating. Within seconds, he decides your fate. Work, gas chamber, or something far worse. This was not just any doctor. This was Josef Mengele, the man known as the Angel of Death. A man who twisted medicine into a weapon of cruelty, who turned science into torture. Tonight, we uncover his rise, his crimes, and how he managed to escape justice for decades. Doctors are bound by a simple oath. First, do no harm. It is a principle meant to protect life, but inside Auschwitz, one man shattered that promise again and again. Josef Mengele became the most infamous doctor in Nazi Germany's most notorious death camp. Why does his story matter? Because it shows us how science, when stripped of ethics, can become a tool of destruction. Mengele is remembered not only as a war criminal, but as a symbol of how ideology can poison medicine, and how cruelty can masquerade as research. In this video, we'll walk through his life step by step, his early years, his education, his path to Auschwitz, the horrors he unleashed there, his escape after the war, and his final years in hiding. Act 1. Early life and education. Josef Mengele was born on March 16, 1911, in the Bavarian town of Günzburg, Germany. He was the eldest son in a comfortable, middle-class family. Nothing in his early years hinted at the monster he would become. There was no abuse, no trauma, no obvious signs of darkness. At the age of 15, he suffered a serious bone infection that left him bedridden for months. He eventually recovered, but the time lost made him determined to excel academically. By the time he returned to school, he had become one of the best students in his class. He went on to study anthropology at the University of Munich and medicine at the University of Frankfurt. During this time, he was exposed to the growing pseudoscience of eugenics, the belief that some races and groups were genetically superior and others were unfit to exist. Eugenics was widely accepted in Germany's academic circles in the 1930s, and Mengele absorbed these ideas wholeheartedly. One professor who influenced him deeply was Dr. Ottmar von Verschuer, a leading figure in racial science. Under Verschuer's mentorship, Mengele developed a fascination with twins, believing they were the perfect way to study genetics. By 1935, Mengele had earned a PhD in anthropology, and 2 years later, a medical degree. In 1937, he joined the Nazi Party. The following year, he became a member of the SS Hitler's elite corps. The stage was set. Act 2. War and path to Auschwitz. Erupted. Mengele was called into military service. He joined the Waffen-SS as a medical officer. In 1942, he was wounded while serving on the Eastern Front against the Soviet Union. He received the Iron Cross for bravery after pulling 2 comrades from a burning tank. After his recovery, he returned to research work, still under the guidance of Verschuer. By 1943, Mengele requested something shocking. He wanted to be transferred to Auschwitz. His reasoning was simple. Auschwitz gave him access to thousands of prisoners, an endless supply of human test subjects with no restrictions, no oversight, and no chance of refusal. On May 30, 1943, Josef Mengele arrived at Auschwitz-Birkenau. His official role was camp physician for Roma prisoners. But in reality, He quickly became one of the most feared figures in the entire camp. His duties included selections, the process of sorting prisoners arriving by train. With a flick of his wrist, Mengele decided who was healthy enough to work, who was sent immediately to the gas chambers, and who would be spared for his experiments. Survivors recalled his chilling calmness. Unlike other SS officers who struggled with the process, Mengele performed selections with ease. Sometimes, he even cracked cruel jokes. Act 3. Experiments and Cruelty. Selections were only the beginning. Mengele wanted to use Auschwitz to conduct what he considered genetic research. What followed were some of the most horrific medical experiments in history. Selections and disease outbreaks. When disease broke out in the camp, Mengele's method of control was extermination. In February 1944, during a typhus outbreak, he ordered 600 women killed to stop the spread. In July 1944, he had 4,000 prisoners executed for the same reason. For him, human life meant nothing. The twin experiments. Mengele's obsession with twins became infamous. Guards were ordered to separate twins from arriving families. Mothers sometimes gave up their children willingly, thinking they might be spared. At one point, there were over 350 pairs of twins housed in his special barracks. The experiments were brutal. He drew excessive amounts of blood, leaving children weak and often dead. He performed forced transfusions between twins, ignoring blood type. He injected chemicals into their eyes in an attempt to change their color. He even attempted grotesque surgeries, such as sewing children together in attempts to create artificial conjoined twins. Whenever one twin died, the other was killed as well, so Mengele could perform side-by-side dissections. Other victims, Mengele also targeted dwarves and people with deformities. He photographed them, studied them, and then preserved their skeletons for research. He collected hundreds of eyeballs, storing them in jars to study conditions like heterochromia. When a person has two different eye colors, deceptive kindness, perhaps the most chilling part of his cruelty, was his ability to deceive. Mengele ran a so-called kindergarten for Roma children, where he handed out candy and toys to visitors. It looked like he was caring for them. In reality, many of those children were taken for experiments and never returned. This mix of false charm and sadism earned him the name Angel of Death. Act 4. Collapse of Auschwitz and Escape. By January 1945, the Soviet army was advancing. Mengele quickly destroyed his research notes, killed his remaining subjects, and fled Auschwitz. He disguised himself in a Wehrmacht uniform and joined retreating German troops. Captured by U.S. forces in June 1945, Mengele was held as a prisoner of war. But astonishingly, no one realized who he was. Lacking proper records and using a false name, he was released. For 4 years, he lived in hiding in Bavaria, sheltered by family and Nazi sympathizers. In 1949, with help from a Nazi smuggling network, he escaped to South America using a false passport under the name Helmut Gregor. Act V. Life in hiding. In Argentina, Mengele lived comfortably among a community of exiled Nazis. He worked as a businessman, even returning to Europe briefly to see family. In 1956, his first marriage officially ended. He later remarried his brother's widow, but his freedom didn't last quietly. In 1959, West Germany issued a warrant for his arrest. Keen hunters, including Simon Wiesenthal, began tracking him. Around the same time, Adolf Eichmann, another top Nazi, was captured by Israeli agents in Argentina. Mengele fled once again, this time to Paraguay. and later to Brazil. He lived there for years under yet another false name, supported by a network of Nazi sympathizers. Despite international manhunts, including Mossad operatives and a $3 million bounty, Josef Mengele was never caught. Act 6. Death and Legacy. In 1977, Mengele met his son Rolf for the last time. During their meeting, he insisted he had done nothing wrong. In his words, he had only helped children. He denied sending people to the gas chambers. He denied the experiments. He denied everything. 2 years later, on February 6, 1979, Josef Mengele died of a stroke while swimming off the coast of Brazil. He was buried under the name Wolfgang Gerhard. Authorities didn't confirm his identity until 1985, when his body was exhumed and examined by forensic experts. The scale of his crimes is almost impossible to measure. At least 1,500 pairs of twins were subjected to his experiments. Fewer than 100 pairs survived. Thousands more were killed in his disease purges or sent to their deaths during selections. Tens of thousands perished at his orders. Mengele's legacy is one of betrayal. He was a doctor who abandoned every principle of medicine, turning healing into horror. His story stands as a warning of what happens when science is stripped of humanity. Doctors are meant to protect life. Josef Mengele used his title to destroy it. Kuta, never facing trial, never held accountable. For survivors, that injustice remains a scar, but history remembers him not as a scientist, not as a doctor, but as a symbol of cruelty and the abuse of power. His name is a reminder that ethics in science is not optional, it is essential. What part of Mengele's story shocked you most, the experiments on children, or the fact that he escaped justice for so long? Share your thoughts below. If you want more untold stories from history, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Nexus, and ring the bell so you never miss a new upload.